Hey, it's Soul with another video on World of Warcraft's game design. I want to give a big thanks to our patrons and to our subscribers for their support so I can keep giving insightful feedback on the game that we all want to succeed, right? Yeah, of course. World of Warcraft Classic is more than just a dream. It's a reality that we can look at with a very clear lens today. Seeing the hardest content at the time being demolished within days of it opening, even if it's from the most knowledgeable and dedicated of players, leaves new and lasting impressions on how difficult endgame content was, or wasn't. The same goes for the outdoor experience, specifically leveling, which is the stage that most players in Classic are still on right now. Over the past week or so, it's been fascinating to see a sudden attitude shift without so-called quality of life improvements like shared mob tagging, or features that aren't really features, like seeing the same people more than once on your realm because really you're supposed to see only people from your realm. But because a majority of players aren't max level and spamming trade for Onyxia attunement runs, the jury is still out whether the social structure of Classic is going to be as rosy as some say. The notion of realm or server identity isn't quite there yet, and for the most part realm identity is limited to language, whether it's the streamer server or not, or if there's still a big ass queue. But among many Classic fans, the verdict is in for today's WoW, and its flaws run deep. At the core of these flaws are Blizzard's invisible hands that dynamically controls who you see out in the world. And these controls turned WoW from a collection of realms with their own personalities into virtual mega servers. Cross-realm and sharding technology is going to be the topic of today. And for the sake of argument, let's try to agree on this one statement: that these features, while they had the best of intentions, they've warped or otherwise destroyed the sense of community and realm identity. I believe Blizzard did mean well when first implementing these cross-realm shenanigans. There's nothing wrong with wanting it to be easier to bring players together. So I want to ask, what went wrong with this feature? And can we basically kill it? I can almost feel your fingers typing away at your quick solution, but for now, I encourage you to hold off on that. I can guarantee you that undoing a system that has permeated its way into the game this deeply is not going to be nearly as easy as you think. This is not going to be a short video, and I'm just making a presentation here. Actually doing something, that's going to be the real challenge. But until then, strap in. We're going for a ride. Now that WoW Classic is out, you should be familiar with this conversation. Hey, are you playing the World of Warcraft?
Yeah,
Sweet, you playing Horde or Alliance?
Alliance.
Nice. What server?
Ash Caddy.
Ah crap, I'm on Mankrik. Bummer. Believe it or not, relationships do form from outside the World of Warcraft. We might meet new friends, classmates, co-workers, people of interest. And since WoW's launch, people have come and gone. As we grew with the game and met new people we shared a love for the World of Warcraft with, it would be cool to play with each other without having to shell out real cash to do a transfer. At one point, the state of realms in the World of Warcraft was fragmented, to say the least. In the US region, players were spread across 240 realms, with the last one opening up early 2009. Even then, the sense of balance between realms was really shaky. Big realms got bigger, while small realms were left hanging. Faction imbalances grew worse over time because of player attitudes and balance changes. Blizzard had choices to make, but at the time, the option of merging realms together was not one of them. Some have said it's because it would make Blizzard look bad to investors, whatever that means. But the team has consistently been on message about one thing, and that's to preserve the sense of community within said realms. It's one thing for players to migrate to and from a realm, causing a slow and steady shift in what makes that realm special. But taking entire realms along with their players, their economies, and the general climate, and forcing them together would be far too disruptive. That's why in WoW Classic, Blizzard has been extremely conservative about adding realms because they're once again concerned that history might repeat itself. Unfortunately, in their first go with the World of Warcraft, Blizzard also went down a path that did in fact bring realms together in a disruptive way. And then they went on to make it far worse than realm merges could ever have been. Whoops. So we're going to take a historical glance at what Blizzard's done to WoW over the years. But if you're already familiar with this part, you can click on the timestamp below in the description to skip to the solutions that I'm proposing for the long-term health of WoW. It all started with cross-realm battlegrounds, which came as early as vanilla. This didn't seem so bad back then, considering the competitive nature of battlegrounds. You could even say that it heightened the sense of realm identity, because you would see someone from a certain realm and you would think, ugh, that's the guy from the realm that sucks. The Looking for Dungeon tool was introduced in patch 3.3, a few months after the last realm was added to the US region, bringing the total to 240, according to Wowpedia. To this day, the LFD tool is looked with a level of controversy. The most often used talking point is that automatic matchmaking replaced the need for social interactions between players. More recent tools, notably the pre-made group finder to facilitate grouping in more difficult content, has diminished the impact of the LFD tool, but it still set up that negative stigma. Personally, I think that there's a lot more at play here, but the point isn't wrong either. During the Cataclysm expansion came Real ID, and shortly after, the ability to invite Real ID friends cross-realm into dungeons. Contrast to the automatic system of the LFD tool, being able to manually invite your faraway friends was well received, because it answers the original concern of getting players who know each other connected, as opposed to automatically being paired up with some typical rando. Later in Cataclysm came the Raid Finder difficulty, using a pool of players across multiple realms. Realm identity felt compromised by this stage, and this single statement may sum this up. The witnesses to your accomplishments were complete strangers. They don't care, and neither do you. The point is that when it came to grouping together for instance content, the pool of players grew from realm to battle group to an entire region's worth of players. And yet, despite the growing feeling of anonymity as dungeon crawls became dungeon runs, and those dungeon runs became races thanks to Mythic Plus, this method of grouping is still voluntary. You can still invite your favorite teammates to be a friend or even a battle tag friend. If they're more local, hey, invite them to guild. Believe it or not, using matchmaking tools in the World of Warcraft is meant to be your secondary option if your friends or guildmates aren't on. But in an industry where keeping your attention grows more challenging every day, Blizzard opted to get players to spend less time waiting and more time playing. However, unlike the group building tools for instanced content, cross-realm zones and sharding are anything but voluntary. Cross-realm zones came with the launch of Mists of Pandaria. The point of this technology was to make playing through the first 8 years of WoW expansion content not feel so lonesome. If you're in the Barrens, hey, you might run into a few other players who just so happen to be in the Barrens too, they're just on another realm. A feature like this sounds pretty cool until I keep talking. Seeing other players cross-realm has its drawbacks. For example, you might run into an enemy player who might start trouble until they move to a different zone and then suddenly poof, they gone. You can't trade with people cross-realm. But most critical is that the person that you see running by may never cross paths with you ever again, because you're on one of maybe dozens of versions of the same space. Cross-realm zones were meant to inject life into old leveling zones, like ambiance. In my opinion though, it's a lie. It's an overcomplicated solution to a minor problem that ended up causing way more issues than it solved. Later in Mists of Pandaria, Blizzard seemed to have reneged on their mandate to not disrupt realm communities, announcing that they would take certain realms and permanently connect them. By the end of their year-long campaign, Blizzard brought the number of realms in the US region from 240 to half of that. Realms were connected according to population and faction balance, or imbalance. Some connections involved only 2 realms, while in a few cases, up to 6 realms were connected together. And yet, when you're choosing realms in-game, you don't see this being reflected at all. So if you wanted to choose between the Deathwing, Kalagos, and Executus realms, hey, don't worry, because they're all the same realm. Warlords of Draenor brought in the pre-made group tool, which isn't so much an addition, but it's more like a supplement to everything that's going on. Legion gave the World of Warcraft sharding technology, basically an upgrade to the original cross-realm system. This brought population control to a whole new level, by not just bringing players together on underpopulated areas, but by separating them on overpopulated areas. This actually worked really well during the Legion launch, where there were thousands of players all crowded around a single space in the middle of Dalaran, but we would only see maybe a few dozen or 100 people instead. However, with the exception of roleplay realms, sharding was always on. Friends and even guildmates might be standing next to you, but they're not next to you. They happen to be on another shard. Camping for rare spawns was no longer a question of patience or tenacity, but whether you used add-ons or tools to realm hop to a desired shard. One day you could just be minding your own business walking through a zone, and the next a full raid group appears right on top of you and cuts you down. That particular instance would be addressed in the Battle for Azeroth expansion and the current iteration of WoW's cross-realm technology, which includes War Mode. War Mode is a kind of separate shard with clear divides and separate rules. It uses the region's pool of players and from there creates a number of shards while evening out faction distribution. Its implementation has been it's been shaky at best. Blizzard has employed different incentives, like luring players into War Mode, while also offering bonuses to the less populous faction in order to even out the population. What we get right now is a mix of players who are eager to join War Mode for the bonuses, as well as bloodthirsty PvPers eager to wipe out those players who are there only for the bonuses. So to summarize, or if you clicked over, there are features that Blizzard introduced that I'm going to describe with very blunt terms, like, is this pro-community or anti-community? Cross-realm grouping for the purpose of completing raids or dungeons. Pro. Random matchmaking and the pre-made group tools as a backup option. Also pro-community. Random matchmaking and the pre-made group tools as a primary option. I'd say that's anti-community. Merging realms after careful consideration. Definitely pro-community. Dynamic systems like cross-realm zones and sharding. Definitely anti-community. This video essay has a primary goal, and that is to write and enforce a new mandate for WoW. It's similar to Blizzard's current philosophy to get players connected, as well as have them spend less time waiting and more time playing. But we're going to add to this. Each time you log into the world, you'll run into familiar friends and rivals that'll make your return to Azeroth feel like a return home. So there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle, tangled in the mess that Blizzard made in their desire to keep players connected, regardless of whether these players wanted to or not. So I'd like for you to listen carefully to everything that I have to say because I just might have sort of fixed it. This won't be an easy or a clean fix. It's going to be disruptive, expensive, time-consuming, and extremely risky. When it comes to giving feedback like this, it's easy to get people to agree that yes, change should happen and things are bad. But getting into the specifics is where all of our paths will diverge. So as always with these kinds of videos, I encourage that you keep an open mind and of course to share your thoughts in a comment below. I just think that this is awesome though, so well, strap in, here goes. First we'll tackle this on the back end. We're going to take another pass at connecting low population realms with a focus on those that also have a big faction imbalance. The rough estimate is that the 120 existing realms and connected realms will be brought down to about 90. So the reality is that not too many players should be affected by this round of merges. The intention here is to have few to no low pop realms, just medium and higher. Faction imbalances on high and full realms, they're not going to be touched. It's unfortunate, but that's 15 years worth of history, 15 years worth of shaping each realm's community that can't simply be undone. Next is to abandon the premise of so-called connected realms and just go all in, do a full merge. To deal with naming conflicts, a really big change is going to happen to WoW that will allow players to have a second name. As a result, all existing characters will be flagged for a name change. I know I made this sound like it's no big deal. You might already be thinking, whoa dude, that's way too time consuming for Blizzard to ever want to do. But for the sake of taking WoW in a better direction, sometimes big proposals are needed. And I'm just getting started. The Realm Select screen is also in dire need of an update. Right now, all you get is the name of the realm, and that's it. Every other source of information is third-party, and thus not all that reliable. So a new system will be in place on the Realm Select screen that displays more high-level information like the Realm's time zone, approximately when the Realm's peak time is, if you should expect a queue, and maybe a snapshot of whether a Realm's population leans more towards the Horde or the Alliance. I think that this goes a long way as opposed to making a character on said realm and asking trade chat for a coherent answer. The last of the backend changes will be to take the 90 realms that we have now and then put them onto battle groups based on factors like data center location, time zone, population, and faction balance. I'll get into more of the specifics later, but for now, let's go in-game. Let's get to the good stuff. Cross-realm features will only be active in very specific situations. Now, you'll still be able to group up with friends on your battle tag or your real ID list, but the group finder tool is not going to be what it was. It's only going to let you search for players on your realm. Queuable content like the dungeon and raid finder is going to look for players on your realm first, followed by your battle group if too few players are found. The same will go for PvP content like battlegrounds just as before. But the notion of cross-realm zones and sharding as you know it will be gone. Here are a few examples. If you're part of a cross-realm group to run maybe a raid or a Mythic Plus dungeon, you're not going to see any of your cross-realm members until you're either inside the instance, or if they were to compromise, maybe in the vicinity of the nearby meeting stone. If there's a world boss, or otherwise you need help out in the open world, no one outside your realm will be able to help you. Underpopulated parts of the world will no longer be populated with people from outside your realm. But sharding will be in place in the event that an overpopulated area is disrupting the flow of the game. Something like this will stay in place in situations like an expansion or a patch launch. I get that this is going to need some explaining because what I'm proposing here breaks a lot of the game as we know it. I intend to cover every situation, but if I miss something, please mention it in a comment and I'll try to answer it. Features like looking for dungeon and raid finder, they've gotten a lot of crap over the years as a replacement for being social within your realm. But by now, we've lived in a world of multiplayer matchmaking far longer than we've lived without it. What's more is that in recent years, with the introduction of the pre-made group tool and Mythic Plus, players can now optionally graduate from these old tools of almost anonymous matchmaking. Years ago, running the daily heroic dungeon was a typical thing because back then, it was one of the few things you can do. Today, probably not as much. Being able to connect with faraway friends is a feature that can't be undone. But I've been asking myself lately, is it necessary to have this sort of freedom in the outdoor world? The upcoming patch 8.2.5 is going to bring us Party Sync, a feature that lets higher and lower level players play together by syncing levels and quest progression down to the lowest denominator. It sounds like Party Sync directly contradicts what I'm proposing today. However, having a group where multiple players have different levels, different quest progression, and on top of that, different realms, I would consider this combination to be uncommon, to say the least. I think it's worth compromising this scenario if it means that we no longer have to deal with a raid group full of strangers suddenly showing up at our doorstep. How many of us have been using the group finder to quickly gather a bunch of random people that we don't know, smash the world boss, and then leave without a word, unconsciously knowing that you're unlikely to ever see them again? Warcraft Communities is an embattled system that I really wish would have been implemented better ever since its introduction, but this will be greatly affected by these changes as well. I mean, what's the point of cross-realm communities when cross-realm is so limited in scope? But consider this. I'm proposing to change the group finder so that it only works on your realm. Sure, there's going to be a bit less typing between the group leader and applicants, but over on the group finder, at least everyone is local to your realm, and subject to fame or infamy. In patch 8.2.5, you'll be able to search for communities based on keywords. What I'm implying here is that you can now search for a community that's dedicated to pugging raids or Mythic Plus. So this means communities can now act as the replacement, the new cross-realm group finder. But in this case, each community is going to have its own social structure, leadership, and so on, complete with its rules and reputations. So in both instances, whether you're trying to work inside communities or in the pre-made group tool, if you act like a jerk, you're eventually going to be known as a jerk. Also, communities are still an answer to being part of several in-game networks at once between people from other realms. Communities that are cross-realm can help connect players for more social aspects of WoW, like cross-realm roleplay, or events like transmog contests. So we have to ask ourselves, is it fair that players would have to maybe go into a raid in order for something like this to happen? Or can there be special compromises, like allowing players cross-realm to see each other in sanctuary areas like Shatrath or Dalaran? These are just a few of the discussions that we ought to consider. And then we have to think about War Mode. Similar to cross-realm grouping, War Mode is like a box that can't easily be closed, if at all. Separating realms back into PvE and PvP realms could be just as jarring as it was when they were removed. Earlier in this essay, I mentioned battle groups, which are clusters of realms that were once used as separate pools for battlegrounds and the dungeon finder. The return of battle groups will serve an additional purpose, and that's to manage a single War Mode shard per group. It's hard for me to be specific here, but I imagine that Blizzard knows just how many players per realm on average queue up for War Mode. Based on that measurement, Blizzard can possibly group up realms based on size, time zone, and their participation in War Mode. Since I'm talking about this though, I should remind you that I am not an engineer. I have absolutely no working knowledge on how complicated this can actually be. For now, let's go back to some wishful thinking. In practice, if a player switches to War Mode, they're going to be placed into their battle group's War Mode shard. So yeah, this is cross-realm tech at play, but it's limited to a few realms as opposed to all of them. Unlike today's War Mode though, there will only be one shard. There's only going to be a very limited system that tries to manage faction imbalances. So just because you might be on a faction-heavy realm, it doesn't mean that your War Mode shard might someday be imbalanced in the other team's favor. The most important point is that if you want to PvP or not, you still can. So let me get into some specific questions about what's going to happen in this new World of Warcraft. So if my realm suddenly becomes dead, will sharding or cross-realm help? And the answer is frankly no. If your realm is dead, it's dead. You can still queue for content or search a cross-realm community that specializes in making groups. But if you're looking for a lively outdoor world experience, you probably want to consider shopping for a place to transfer to. Next, what happens when there are too many players in a single zone and sharding does happen? This should only happen during moments of great stress, like a patch or an expansion launch, or if maybe, I don't know, a big streamer one day says, hey everyone, come to this realm over here, hop into Dalaran and let's make a big old conga line. Sharding will go in only one direction, and that's to split players up. There are two ways the system would do this. It would either take the full shard and cut it into two, or it would take the excess players jumping in and placing them onto this new shard. Regardless, this situation should be pretty rare. Of course, when two people on the same realm want to party together, they'll end up joining the same shard. But no one's gonna want to be on the dead shard. So while the game might automatically move players back to the original shard as the population dwindles down, how about we also give players the option to manually queue up for the shard of their choice? This sort of transparency would help in the event that if all the fun is happening on Shard B, it's easy for players from Shards A or C to try hopping over as opposed to using the pre-made group finder to realm hop. This sort of system can work the same way in War Mode as well. So just what sort of World of Warcraft do we have after all these changes? Just from logging in, players should have a clear understanding of the realm that they choose to be a part of. You're also going to get a second name on your character. I admit that this is just something that I wanted to squeeze in there, but it sounds pretty cool. The outdoor world is going to have that original feel that we experienced from vanilla all the way up to Cataclysm, and WoW Classic as well. You're going to see the people on your realm walk the land and fill the cities. There's no second guessing that the person in front of you is part of your local community. Group building will still be queuable at a basic level, but there will be strong social tools to encourage good play and cooperation in part of all players, or else. War Mode is going to feel like a more consistent experience. Whether it's consistently in your favor or not is really up to you. What I'm proposing here are very, very big changes, and even then, this is still just a few improvements to try moving WoW towards a better direction. There's still a lot more work to be done with world design, class design, and working on making WoW a place of wonder and excitement at every level, not just max level. It took a long time for WoW to get where it is now. It may take just as long for WoW to get to where we want it to be. But until then, let's keep giving good feedback and suggestions. If you think any of these ideas are worth exploring, like and share this video with freaking everybody. Let Blizzard know how you feel. I also welcome some discussion in the comments if you want to refine, challenge, or just dog on these ideas. I like hearing them because it makes me try harder, and I don't intend on stopping. Thank you for watching. I know this was a long one, but I hope it was worth it. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.